Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We are currently in Module 9. In this lesson, we're going to be reviewing the planning guidelines, the way we plan out an application. So let's do that by doing a would review. Now, if you remember, it's been a few lessons, or a few courses actually, but I walked through the idea of the would framework, the WOULD. So we're going to review that to make sure that you have a good understanding of how you plan out a project, because it's been a while since we've done it together. Now hopefully you've been practicing this, but just in case you haven't, let's walk through the steps. Step 1, walk through the project. And the idea there is that you just kind of read through the requirements and just get a better understanding. Ask some good questions about maybe gaps that you see. All right? So just look at the project and think through the big picture, the very big picture of what the application should be or should do. Next, open up the requirements. And these first two steps kind of go hand in hand, and you may do them together. In fact, in our Module 5, when we did the Battleship Light application, we did them together. But in this course, we're going to do them separately, just to kind of separate the ideas a little bit, and because as your project grows in scope, you may have to do these separately. So open up the requirements is where we take a deep dive into what are we going to do here, what's the ideas, the thoughts about how this application works, what's missing from the requirements, and what do we need clarifications on. Basically, we're trying to kill our assumptions. When you assume, you cause problems. You want to expose those assumptions early on in the process. You don't want those assumptions to be left until after you've developed based upon those assumptions. Because if those assumptions are wrong, then you have to undo all the development work you've done, and all the planning work you've done based upon those assumptions. So make sure you think through those assumptions. Next, the user interface design. This is not something you do inside of a program. I've had people offer me different tools. They're like, well, this makes it look prettier. This makes it look better. It does, but it takes time. You want this to be as fast as possible. I encourage you to draw it on a piece of paper or go to a whiteboard. All right? The idea that you don't want to have anything hindering you from throwing away your work and starting over. The more effort and time you put into something, first of all, the more reticent you are to throw it away. But also, you get more and more locked into the idea that this is the way. And it may not be. You want to be open to the idea of changing everything. And if you draw things out, sketch things out real quickly on a notepad or on a whiteboard, it's really easy to erase and start over. So, user interface design, draw out the rough concepts. This is not perfect. This is not close to perfect. This is not about having design skills or drawing skills. I have 0 drawing skills, and I do this on paper. Next, logic design. This is where you're not talking about the nitty-gritty specific things. You're talking about big picture design ideas. So for example, are we going to use an API? Do I know how to talk to an API if so? All right. Not do I have, do I have the code for that? It's, have I done this before? Because if not, maybe you do go and learn how to do that step. You go on my YouTube channel, there's a video on how to read from an API. Maybe you watch that video. Now, we're not going to use an API in this course, but if you did, that's what you probably do, is something like that. Okay, so the idea, big picture. We're going to send emails from this application. Have you ever done that before? If not, figure out how to send an email from a test application. So you know you have the major building blocks. How that connects to your SQL database, that's not for here to design. That's a small picture implementation thing that you'll do in code. But for the big picture pieces, those big Lego bricks, make sure you know what all the different Lego bricks do. And then later you can put those together in new and interesting ways to create your house or your application. All right? So logic design. the big picture. And finally, data design. This, again, is not about actually creating the T-SQL statements you need to create your SQL Server database. This is about what data do we need, and then writing it down on paper, and then kind of grouping the data as it makes logical sense. And say, okay, if we have a person information and they have an address, well, can they have two addresses? If so, we should probably store addresses separate from people. Now, how they link up and how we do the relationships, that's for actual implementation. But for our design, we just need to know, okay, we'll have a person table, we'll have an address table. That's all you really need to worry about. And then you figure out, okay, a person is a first name, a last name, and an email and phone number. And for email and phone number, we'll have one of each. We're not going to ask for multiple or store multiple. Therefore, we don't have to have separate tables for them. But for addresses, we'll have a separate address table with street address 2, city, state, zip, and country. All right? So those are the kind of things you're going to put down. You're not going to go really in depth into what data types and all the rest. You're just kind of grouping things or clustering things together into various pieces that you can then use to actually build your database. All right, so that's the 5 steps of the Wood framework. When you're done these 5 steps, you have a great starting point for building your application. So let's talk about today's pro tip. Change your position to plan. Doing so will reduce your desire to start doing. What I mean by this is I work at my desk, and my desk is kind of like where everything is. So it's where I have my notepad, it's where I have my computer, it's where I have, all the things that I can work on. Even my phone sits on my desk. So if I were to plan at my desk, I can easily be distracted by my email. If I plan on my computer digitally, I can easily be distracted by this other stuff on my computer. So change your position physically. So I have a whiteboard in my office. What I'll do is I will sit in a different chair and I will look at the whiteboard. Sometimes I'll put headphones on and play music just to kind of get me in the right mood, but that's it. I have a whiteboard marker in my hand and I'm sitting in a different chair looking at just the whiteboard. It's a whole lot easier to not get distracted. All of my stuff is somewhere else. My notifications don't pop up. My phone's on vibrate. Nothing is bothering me or distracting me while I focus on planning. The more you can focus, the better your planning will be. If you get distracted in the middle of planning, that's when you forget things or skip over whole areas. And then later you'll find that when you try to implement that, you're like, where are we storing our addresses? We have no address table. And you'll realize, oh, I forgot to even do that address table because I got interrupted after the person table. I meant to do it. I came back and I went right to the hotel room table. Okay? So that's the kind of problem you try to avoid by doing it at one time and doing it at a different location than your computer. All right? That's one more reason why digital tools are not really helpful for developing and designing. One of the questions I get a lot is, can I show UML design? Here's my answer to that. I have not seen UML design outside of the classroom. I have consulted with hundreds of companies. I have not seen developers using UML design. I'm not saying no developers do that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's not a common practice. Maybe it is in your part of the world, but in the US, the people I've worked with, it has not been. And the reason why is because UML design is it's a lot of work and it doesn't actually give you a whole lot of benefit. So I have found that doing things like UML or doing things like those design sites where you have if you're developing an iPhone app, it looks like an iPhone, but it's just kind of sketched out. Those kind of things, they look great and they can even do some really cool stuff, but that's not a good design tool because you spend more time tinkering with the tool than you do designing. You want your focus to be 100% on designing your application, not on the tool, not distracted by this or that. You want to be focused. Keep it really, really simple. All right? That's my encouragement to you. That's my suggestion, my tip for today. Change your position. Don't do it electronically. And reduce your desire to start doing by doing it in a different way in a different place. Okay? So, once you've kind of thought through that process, maybe found a different place to start doing your planning, come on back for the next video where we'll start on the W step of our planning process.